Tom Eggers, local handyman. Um, it's almost spring, believe it or not. I know it's been hard to tell. Um, like most people, I still have huge piles of snow around my house, which haven't melted, but they will. Those piles will become water. And it's very important to know what to do if that water should decide to enter your home instead of going down the hill or wherever it's supposed to go had it not been frozen. There's different types of snow. There's the light, fluffy snow that usually is on top that melts pretty quick. And then there's my backyard, which is a solid sheet of ice, about 2 inches of ice. So that takes a lot longer to melt, a lot hotter day to melt that. Some of the things, as we approach spring, some of the things we want to think about is the air quality in our homes. We've been sealed them up because we don't want the drafts and the cold air coming in, but that can also be bad for all the air that you're breathing in every day. I run an air purifier aside my furnace that has metal plates that collect all the kind of dust and dander and all the debris. And I have to clean those about once a week. And the rag just comes out black. So I'd rather have to do that than have that in my lungs. If you don't have air purifier, you can purchase one, but you can also, on the warmer days, like when we were when it almost hit 60, just open up the windows, get some cross ventilation into the house. And just for, 15 minutes to a half hour, get some cross ventilation in, get all that recycled air out of the house, and then seal everything back up. It won't make too big a dent in your heating bill on a warm day. Another thing is if you have a furnace filter, like a 1-inch filter, very small filter, change that out sometimes twice a month if you have to. As soon as the white filter starts looking a little dingy gray, change it out. If you have pets, if all that hair's collecting along the bottom, change it out. The cost of a $10 filter isn't worth what's going in your lung. If you have a 4-inch filter, which is much, much wider, you don't have to change that till every 6 months. The manufacturer recommends a year. I wouldn't go a year. I'd go until you start seeing actual dust bunnies lodged in it, and then just change it out. For me, that's about 6 months, but I have a dog, so you have to do it more often. Another thing is you've been running your laundry all winter. You have lint buildup. If your clothes aren't really drying as fast, you may just want to check the opening on the outside of the house. Make sure the flapper that keeps the cold air from going back into your laundry system, your dryer, isn't clogged up with lint, because that hot air can build up moisture, and that moisture can freeze. And I've seen some metal, some are plastic, some are metal flaps frozen shut, and all the lint has absorbed all that moisture from the hot air and kind of sealed it up. So check those. It's also can be a fire hazard. So from the insurance side, it's good to check it. It's usually around the house, somewhere where it pokes out. Sometimes if you have a first floor laundry, sometimes it's up high above the garage or something. But check that out. And then now, believe it or not, you're not thinking about, how can I make my house colder? But now's the time to at least book your AC tune-up, because I'm not a HVAC person, but if you have one, book it now, because I actually had somebody, I have a neighbor who's an HVAC guy, and he had to go out and replace the contactors inside the AC unit had blown up. They had corroded from the winter, and when the person flipped it on a warm day, like we had 60 degrees, just for a minute, the contactors just blew up. So that safeguards the system, but it also means when we start getting into the warm weather, it won't work. So schedule your AC tune-up, because burnt wires, extended contactor, and even low freon can make that first warm day in April really unbearable if the AC doesn't kick on. The other thing to think about too, and this is a little plug for Walt, is fertilizing your lawn. I start fertilizing my lawn just as the snow melts. I don't know what Walt's recommendation is, but that's when I do it, just so that the melting snow can work that fertilizer into the lawn and get it, the grass a head start. It also has a crabgrass blocker in it, so you don't get all those really ugly crabgrass patches around the edges of the sidewalks and driveway. Now I'm going to flip over to something that I've actually had 3 or 4 calls about. I'm not a roofer, but people have been asking about ice dams. And I'm sure if you had a house in Pittsburgh this year, it had some pretty good icicles. Mine had about a 3-foot icicle hanging from the roof. Ice dams, what happens is you have about maybe 6 inches of snow on the roof. The top part stays cold, but the bottom part that's touching the roof melts, and it runs down the roof and collects at another cold part and freezes. And it does that over and over and over until it builds an actual wall or dam. And then what happens is the water has nowhere to go. It hits that cold ice, patch of ice, solid ice, and it starts going up the shingle. And potentially, as that water freezes, look like layer by layer, it lifts the shingle up until the water gets underneath the shingle. Now in PA, we have some codes that protect the bottom, say 2 to 4 feet of the roof. It's supposed to have a rubber membrane that goes up, and so that as the ice gets under the shingle, it hits that rubber membrane and tries to direct it back down. But if it gets far enough up the roof, it can actually get under the sheathing and run down and hit a stud or a joist, run down that, hit a wall, and you get the thing, like in my house, you get where the plaster kind of sags a little bit. What's happening is that constant moisture is hitting the plaster and just wetting it just enough where the structure gets a little bowed or gets a little damp and kind of looks like it's melting. If that's happened to you, if it's gone that far, there are things you can do. You don't have to take down the entire wall. What I've done in the past is just first tried to dry it. So I'll take a fan or a dehumidifier and put it directly in that area and get that moisture out of the wall. If it's drywall, it should wick out pretty well. If you can press your finger to it and the finger actually makes a depression, that's pretty saturated. And although it will dry out and re-harden, the concern there would be during that period is mold growth. So the back staying constantly wet would attract and grow mold on the paperback of the drywall. So you kind of want to open that area up as best you can without making too much damage, and dry it out from the inside. Pull any wet insulation out, and then have a small contractor, unless it's a large area, have a small contractor or handyman like myself come in, re-insulate it, and patch the hole and paint it, and it looks good as new. Now, some myths about ice dams. You have this large icicle, maybe it could even be 6 feet long down the side of your house. And there's people that will maybe try and melt it. They'll fill socks or pantyhose with rock salt and throw them up on their roof, or they'll climb up an icy ladder and try and dump ice melt on their roof to try and melt it off. First of all, that's very dangerous if you're not a professional. And second of all, it doesn't really solve the issue. It's just kind of a temporary fix. So I would just kind of grin and bear it myself. You can try and chop it with an axe. There are people that go up on their roofs and try and chop through all this ice, because in some areas, the ice dam can be 2 or 3 inches thick. That's just going to put a hole in your roof. So don't do that. That's bad. And some people hire a roof company to come in and steam it, which is a real thing. They can come up with a wand that has steam, and they can steam it out of your gutter and create that natural flow down your gutter again. What you want to be careful of is if the roofing company shows up and they're dressed in like maybe a poncho or rain gear, and they have a pressure washer, because that can actually blast all the aggregate off your shingle, could blast a shingle off. You don't want them pressure washing any ice off your roof with pressure. You want it to be steam. You want it to be hot and melt. This can be done in just normal like coat and jeans. But if they're wearing any type of protective gear, be careful. Now, when that first happened to me, I went up in my attic. I had just purchased my home in Pittsburgh. Went up in my attic and realized this home was built before modern insulation. So I had this like newspapery stuff. And then on top of that, I had a very thin layer of batt, which is that pink stuff you see. It's made out of fiberglass. All the heat was going from my home directly up to the roof, melting that bottom layer of snow and creating that ice dam. And I pretty much had a icicle that went from my roof to my garage, and it was easily 3 inches around. So I researched what I could do. And the number one factor is get insulation in your attic. Stop that heat from coming from your house up to the roof. As soon as I insulated it, and I worked with the company to insulate my attic, as soon as I insulated it, I never had that problem again until this year. And the reason I believe I had that problem this year is when you look at your roof and it's covered in snow, you can see if there's snow on the roof, your roof is insulated. Anywhere where you can see shingles, but there's 6 inches of snow everywhere else, that's heat escaping. So maybe you have canned lights and the heat goes, they're not insulated. Some, can't be insulated. That heat's going straight up and warming up the roof in that area. Another place that's very common is a bathroom. You have air leaks around the bath fan. It goes straight up and melts, and you'll have icicles forming over the bathroom window. Get those things sealed up with closed cell foam, like spray foam. Get all those leaks sealed up, because that's going to cause an ice dam. But what happened in my case is the warm side of the roof, where the sun hits all day, was getting hot, and I noticed at the crown where I don't have a ridge vent. So at the peak, it was melting all that snow, and all that snow water was running down the roof and creating an ice dam at the eave, or where the gutter is. And I really couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't insulate it. I could put a ridge vent on my roof and stop that from happening, because that would create the airflow. But I'm not going to go through that expense for once every 5-7 years to deal with this problem. So what I can do is I have a moisture meter. If you get that drywall melt, I can come in with my moisture meter and I can put it on the wall and tell you how much moisture is in that wall. An acceptable amount would be between 7 and 15%. Anything higher than that, it's got to get dried out. Once it drops down below the 15%, then we can sand it. It's hard enough to sand, scrape, whatever I need to do, and return it back to its shape, prime it, paint it. So dry it out, dehumidify it, and then repair it. And if you have any questions about ice dams, let me know. If you have any questions about what you need to do in the spring, I'd be happy to just run through the list with you. Every house is different. So if you need to if you don't have a list and it's not something that you're used to doing yourself, I could create a list for you and we could get all those projects done. Tom Eggers, local handyman, here to help.
Hey.